On today's Minute of the Apes, we complete the hand-biting hat trick.
They greenlit the sequel without a story in mind. They just wanted to equal an unexpected gold mine. He said, oh no, as Heston said, I got to go. These are just some of the facts you ought to know as we go. Beneath the Minute of the Apes. Beneath the Minute of the Apes. Beneath the Minute of the Apes.
The only good human is a dead human.
Hello and welcome to Minute of the Apes, a daily podcast where we break down every minute of the Planet of the Apes movies, 1 minute at a time. I don't know what you two are doing over there. It's like a hidden language, but they're over there being quiet and being silly. It's Richard and Sean.
Hey. Hi, everybody.
We are on to Tuesday. It is minute 82. The movie's clipping by. Let's hear what's going on in minute 82. Sean?
All right, we're going to start minute 82 with Taylor and Brent getting up off the floor and ends with a shot of a shocked Nova.
Shocked Nova. That sounds like a rock
Shocked
band.
Nova.
Shocked to the heart. You're to blame.
Shock the monkey.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
All right, here's minute 82 of Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Taylor.
All right, as of minute 82, we've got 3 living humans, a psychor of telepaths, 4 dead humans, 1 dead ape, a shrewdness of apes, and a gaggle of humans.
All right.
And I don't know if you've noticed this during the whole fight scene or not. I'm surprised they didn't sweeten the audio with, the punching sounds that they use in
True.
movies that are. There's nothing to
It's
make
much
this
more of a muffled thud.
Yeah, it's like natural audio rather than having it.
Is that kind of refreshing in a way, though, to have it be? Because if you and I got in a fight right now and hit each other, we would not hear the...
It'd just be a lot of grunting and groaning
and a
saying,
couple
"My
of muffled
sciatica."
thuds. Yeah, exactly.
So let me ask you this. So it's Chris edited a show we did called The Variants, and in order to heighten action, they would take out frames to make it look a little
faster.
more make it look a little more jagged. So particularly add intensity. But because this was like cut editing, right? They wouldn't have been able to do that kind of take out a frame. That would have been like cutting and pasting, cutting and taping.
Yeah, you didn't do a whole lot of that back in the 70s.
You couldn't really do that as expertly as you can today when they make it jagged and jarring by removing random bits of frames.
You could strobe it. There were ways to do that, to get those kind of things. You could actually send it through processes, too, that would have been like the old newsreels were shot on different cameras, but it was not done as it is now. No, it's not as easy now, especially with nonlinear digital editing. You can go in and say, do this and this and this. But back then, you would have had to cut every stinking frame.
Yeah, so that's why it looks a little more. It looks a little more choreographed, dancing, punching kind of stuff. I liked it.
I like it. You know what? I like it too. It does harken to a different era of filmmaking. You look at like what Edgar Wright does, where everything in his films are just cut, and you're constantly moving around. This is kind of nice to actually take your time with it and let the actors play it.
So what the audience did not see from hearing this particular moment is it begins with Anjiro reaching his hand out over and a guard walking up with what appears to be a piece of the bar, like a club. So it's like a 2
kind
foot,
of like a mace almost.
right? A 2 or 3 foot section of the bars that they're fighting in, and it's got one of the jagged barbs at the top, one in the center, and one at the bottom. This is what I find interesting. The script originally said Anjiro feeling his robes, throwing knives on the floor between them.
What?
Mm-hmm. And he forces the 2 men to grab knives. So the scene was originally meant to be with 2 knives, as opposed to this piece of the cell wall that Andro now opens the door and throws into the pit.
Which I thought was funny. I thought first he was coming in there with it to protect himself, like to keep them away from him. But then he just gave it to Brent because Brent sucks as a fighter.
He walks in, the guard opens the door. Taylor has just tossed Brent back up against the wall because, Taylor's the daddy. And there's a pause where they almost seem to lose a little bit of the psychic powers. Like almost the shield comes down and Taylor kind of comes to a sense for a second. And Andro tosses the mace
Brent,
on the floor by Brent for Brent to grab. So I found it an element to which, is Andro in it for the sport, or does Andro need Taylor more dead than he needs Brent dead?
This goes into, again, that I don't entirely understand what Andro's motivation is in this moment and what his need is. I look at that barb club, and I thought it was cool initially, but I thought, how do you order your blacksmith? We'd like to order 3 6-foot by 10-foot enclosures that have a slightly scoping edge, but could you also make us one barb thing so we can let people beat the shit out of each other with it? Where does that come from? Why is it?
If they're peaceful, why do they even have those anyway?
And that's kind of what I was getting to, is that I don't understand where it comes from, because my initial thought was, oh, maybe they use that to kind of, the savages beat them back. But then I thought the same thing, is like, but wait, they use their minds.
So if the script originally intended for knives to be in there, then I would say that they got into this moment and realized that they needed something that would make more sense to the scene, because knives is not something we've seen with the populace.
That's a good point.
So your point about why would they have this weapon, and I agree with you. Why would they have this weapon? But the original script saying knives would even be more unusual for them to suddenly have.
True.
But I find it fascinating that he walks in the scene, and it makes me think that he needs Taylor dead more than he needs Brent, because he throws the club on the floor near Brent as if for Brent to pick up. Now, that moment, I don't know why Andro breaks the battle. When he opens the scene, Taylor goes out of his coma. Brent's on the floor. Andro posts it, and there's a moment where Taylor tries to dart towards the open door, and Andro has to genie blink his head down and put him back into his fighting spell.
Which, I wonder, do you have to close your eyes when you use your telepathy? What happens if somebody sneaks up on you?
Okay, so that does go into how film being a visual medium, you have to have something that connotates that they're doing
the Professor
something.
X 2 fingers to the temple.
Right.
Yeah, and you could have, but that's another visual of what they're doing.
We didn't have Albina's ponytail to bob up like.
Yeah, she does do a genie blink. But again, when that spell is broken, when they're throwing that down for Brent, and I didn't take it that he needs Taylor more dead. I thought it was that we're trying to level the playing field, and let's give something to Brent so he can beat the shit out of
fighting. Yeah,
yeah, he sucks. We're going to level it and give you a chance to fight back.
One person is going to die, right? Or
Yes.
both are going to be mortally wounded. Like Andro's point is that both are going to die, or one is going to die.
And again, what is he trying to prove? Is that we can control people to the point where we let our enemies kill each other, so that we now know as an audience that we can make the apes kill each other, therefore they are not defenseless. However, when the spell is broken and they throw the thing on the ground, why don't Taylor or Brent turn to each other and say, we've got to resist him? Why aren't they engaged in this moment? They're just helpless cogs that are over there fighting, against a machine that they can't even voice out against. It takes the drama out of their possession, and they aren't even a factor in this. And it just seems like it's begging for them to engage in this one another and say, we got to stop.
Well, let's talk about the more important issue. What the hell is a wall made out of that when they touch it, it just starts crumbling down? Did you notice that?
Oh, I thought it was kind of cool.
It
right?
is cool.
It's plaster.
At that point, they should just be attacking the wall.
And I did think
That's a good point.
I did think they put sound. That's a good point. I did think they put sound in that moment. Because there was a weird kind of plaster crumbling sound that was happening as you'd hit the wall. So Brent grabs the mace or the piece of the bar. He swings at Taylor, missed, comes back around to swing again, swipes out just a corner of the wall, of the edge of the wall, takes another swing at Taylor, hits another corner. So he's now taken 2 big chunks out of the wall. There's some really nice sound that happens as they take those chunks out. But yeah, to your point, I could have just used my fingernails and clawed my way to
just
that crate
dig
if
your
it's
way
that
out the
easy.
wall.
I mean, in Shawshank Redemption, it took him how many years to tunnel through a wall like
15
that?
years or something like that?
You know, they're already chipping away. But then we've got that hole in the middle of that wall that is the one wall that is not barred.
Yeah.
And it's a hole that will come back into play in coming minutes. Why isn't that what they hit? That would then make so much more sense why they have a little hole in the wall.
Yeah.
It's just the little details that could have been a little bit sharper.
So interestingly enough, exactly 30 seconds in, we now catch back up with Nova, who's being led by a guard. I have no idea where she's been this entire
whole time, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Was she sitting in the church? She's already been, she's no longer wearing the robe. But just so you guys know, that scene of her being led down the hallway was actually supposed to happen right around the time the two of them were introduced to each other. So she was supposed to kind of be witnessing some of this.
So we go back to the scene in the Hall of Presidents with Andro and Brent when he's there with Caspe. Why weren't they taking Nova away from him at that point, and maybe Albina saying, we're going to probe the girl to see if she can give us any information. And Brent's like, don't hurt her. You know, there's at least dramatic context there that he wants to protect her, and it presents jeopardy. We now understand where she is. But when we see Nova, again, to your point, we don't know where she's gone.
And it would give a potential context and more meaning when he's having his conversation with Caspe and Andra walking down the hallway. Let us go.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know where you just took her. We're not going to cause your problems. Let us go, talk to the apes for you, something.
It's a small tweak that could at least bring gravity to that conversation, and then explain when we see her walking down the hall and she bites her mutant.
That's our third bite.
There's a hat trick.
She hears their names. You hear Brent. They say their names for some reason.
Did they say, that was the thing that
They say Taylor and Brent. They actually say each other's names, which is like they were not talking during the fighting earlier. But it's enough to tip her off to move. It's not the fighting. She hears Taylor and she hears Brent.
I hate to say that it was later on after I'd made the notes that in my mind I kept thinking, did I hear them say the names in there in that low in the mix?
Even though they're not saying, they were low, they were quiet, but they didn't say them while they were fighting, which I found odd. There was also kind of they're doing something interesting here where in a lot of movies when they have two actors walking side by side, they'll do a lot to kind of cheat to make them not necessarily look short and tall. Mm-hmm. They'll kind of do it. The guard here is definitely taller than Nova as well. So she
looks tiny.
They're not doing anything with these tall to short actors for Brent or for Nova, to Heston or to the guards or to Andro. They're letting them be kind of super tall. So he was tall to her. When she hears Brent and Taylor's name, when they say their names, she kind of turns to her left, screen right. He pulls at her, and that's when we get the hand bite.
So, speaking of what they usually do in movies like this, a character is usually not going to hear, if she's walking down the hall with some dude, she's not just going to hear Brent Taylor. What's going to happen is we hear a fight in the distance. We hear sounds. Maybe we see a guard running by. Something is escalating. You always escalate. You always ramp these things up, and you see it, and that's when you hear Brent Taylor, and she's like, oh my God, and bites. But it literally is, she gets a trigger and she bites and is ready to go. It's just another weird moment. The only other major thing that I really want to touch on, and this goes to Heston, we've already talked about the dude's toupee, but for a major Hollywood star, he's got some really yellow crooked teeth. Did you notice that?
Well, because Brents are super white. Brents are insanely white.
Well, so are Novas.
Yeah.
A savage.
Did they? I don't know. Did they have whitening in 1970s, or did just people avoid?
I think Heston was a cigar smoker, maybe. Who knows?
I'm pretty sure Heston did some stuff that probably tarnished his teeth, and I think they probably had some version of whitening, not what we have today, where it's all kinds of things that can actually
lights and chemicals,
that can really do that.
So when Nova pulls away and starts to run down that same hallway that we saw Brent led down earlier. For whatever reason, Andro stops for half a second as if he's recognized that she's there. He turns and looks at the guard to send the guard over to get Nova. It was kind of a weird telepathy moment, but I thought it was kind of a nice, I'm responding to something that's about to happen and sending a guard. And by this time, we've actually got Brent now in control, and he's pushing that mace spike
Yeah.
against Taylor, who's now pressed against the wall.
But I also thought that that's another moment where, okay, Brent's already been stabbed in the back. Why isn't that the jeopardy of that moment? Yes, he's got the big club on him, but why isn't that he's pushing Taylor back and here are the spikes coming at him in the back? Repeat that kind of thing. We've already done it. Let's pay it again. The jeopardy is rather obvious because even that shot that you're pulling up right there, Richard, with Nova, we see all the barbed